This is Pretty in Practice, the podcast.
Opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of our own as well as our guests and do not reflect the views and opinions of our respective employers, organizations, academic institutions, committees, other groups, or individuals.
Welcome back to another episode of Pretty in Practice, the podcast. So today we're really excited for our special guest, Sarah Mohammed. She is a registered dietitian and the owner of Nutrition with Intention LLC. Also one of my very good friends from college, so I am very, very excited to have Sarah join us today. She's going to be diving into her decision on pursuing a career in the field of dietetics, as well as going into depth in nutrition, wellness, and a couple other things that we're very excited to dive into. But as you all probably already know, we're going to start with our doctor's diary question. So today's question is going to be, what is your Starbucks order? So I guess I'll go first. My order these days is a grande iced white chocolate mocha with almond milk, light ice, and vanilla sweet cream cold foam. And if I'm feeling a little bit daring with the extra calories, I'll also do a caramel drizzle.
That is so extra. In true lay fashion, but I love it. I can hop in. Mine's not as extra as lay, but I am specific too. I usually order a tall, and I order this drink in any season. A tall peppermint white mocha, sometimes with an extra shot if I need it, with oat milk as well. And I drink peppermint throughout the year, so that's my go-to anytime.
Okay. Let's say I got two. In the summertime, I like double espresso ice, with just like sweet cream foam on top. And then in the wintertime, pretty basic. I do cafe Americano with just like whipped cream on top. So,
Very simple.
I had to pull up my app. Okay, so I also have two drinks that I drink year-round. I don't drink anything hot from Starbucks, all things cold. So I do a tall iced chocolate almond milk shaken espresso, and I need to get through like a long day because it has a double shot in it. And then when I just want Starbucks but don't necessarily need the caffeine, I get a grande green tea frappuccino.
Nice. Okay, is it my turn to go?
Yep.
Well, thank you, ladies, for having me, first and foremost. I am more of a matcha girl myself, so typically I like to get like a medium matcha latte, iced with so I don't go to Starbucks a lot. Funny enough, like I go more so to Dunkin', but my order is usually like 2 blueberry flavor shots in there, and then like 1 shot of stevia, because they like their matcha is already like pre-sweetened, and then I'll do like coconut milk with that. So
I actually want to try matcha.
So I'm embarrassed to say this. I actually have no idea what matcha is, and people order it all the time, and I'm like, what in the world is matcha?
yeah, so it's literally just green tea leaves that have been like ground up. It's like it has a high potency of caffeine compared to just regular green tea. So that's pretty much what people use it for.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll jump right into the question portion of our podcast today. But of course, we'd like to know what led you to your decision of being a dietitian.
Yeah, so I can't really like time market. I do remember when I was working as a pharmacy tech in high school. So I started working as a pharmacy tech at the age of 17, my junior year of high school. I did that for 5 years, and just being exposed to like the health and medical field in that way, really always being excited about food. I've always been a foodie. My parents really exposed us to a lot of different foods very early. I remember eating like so many different cultural foods growing up. There was really like no stone left unturned when it came to food. And so through working as a pharmacy tech, experiencing like my own health issues, because I had developed like irritable bowel syndrome around the time and was trying to like figure out how to work with that. It just kind of all came to me naturally, and just like the idea of using food as medicine. That's one of my principal philosophies, food as medicine. And so looking up what is that? Like, what is the study of dietetics, and just doing my research prior to applying for colleges. And that's kind of how I came across like those type of programs.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Sarah, can you tell us about your educational background? Like what what you had to do as far as degrees and programs that you had to go through in order to get to your position that you have now?
Yeah, so I have a Bachelor in Science from Purdue in dietetics, nutrition, fitness, and health. It's actually one of the dual major programs that they offer at Purdue. So you could just do dietetics, but most people in our major opt for the dual major just because it gives you a little bit of extra study in exercise and fitness. So that's always cool. I took like a lot of exercise classes my junior and senior year, because a lot of people go on to like be personal trainers and things like that as well. So I did that, and then after I graduated, I got into the program at Mississippi State for their dietetic internship. So at the time when I was doing my internship, it wasn't required that you have the master's by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So I was technically in the graduate school at Mississippi State, but we weren't required to finish that degree. And I actually didn't want to finish it because I didn't particularly want a master in nutrition science. Like, I've always kind of wanted, if I go to get my master, like a master in public health or a master in health communications, like that sort of thing. So it's my bachelor degree, and then the supervised practice program to become an RD. And you take your national exam and you get your licensure and all of that.
Okay, and we keep talking about dietetics. This might be a word that some of our audience is not familiar with and doesn't know exists in the healthcare field. So can you just tell us, what is a dietitian? Like, where do they work? What type of people engage with them in the healthcare field? Just tell us a little bit more there so we can all be informed.
Yeah, so dietitians work everywhere. The main distinguishing factor, I guess, what most people ask is like the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. Dietitians work in the medical field, or we're allowed to work in the medical field, and we're allowed to diagnose and treat chronic illnesses that are related to nutrition. So for instance, through insurance, you are only able to work with a registered dietitian in order to be able to bill for what's called medical nutrition therapy. So we are the only health professionals that are able to diagnose nutrition-related illnesses, which is something that like a nutritionist would not be able to do because they don't have that background, those credentials, any of the research knowledge, any of those sort of things.
And can you give us some examples of what some of those illnesses will be related to nutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. So like your more common ones would be like diabetes, which is what I work in. I work in endocrinology, chronic kidney disease. So these are the two main ones that are billable through insurance. High blood pressure, heart disease, gastrointestinal disorders, childhood nutrition. Like there's so many different like branches and just like all of the human body systems if it relates to nutrition.
Thank you. And I love that we're calling those diseases out as being related to nutrition, because a myth that's out there with those diseases is just that it's genetic. If my granddaddy had it, I'm going to have diabetes too. That's not what it is. So I love the emphasis that these are nutrition related illnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. No form of diabetes is genetic. Even with type 1, that is just an autoimmune disorder that occurs, and it's almost like the luck of the draw. But with type 2, it's pretty much mostly lifestyle and modifications.
And we'll hop into that more. But yes, I'm super excited to talk about that.
So this is probably a pretty broad one, but what would you consider good versus bad nutrition? So like, what are some resources people can utilize to ensure that they're getting the right type of nutrition.
Yeah.
Specifically for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw this question and I thought it was interesting because I like to use certain phrasing when it comes to nutrition, so as not to kind of just like categorize food in a way that makes it moral or immoral per se. So the way in which I teach nutrition is I teach it from a standpoint of like what's gonna, like, you have your categories of food that are like more nourishing or like optimally nutritious, and then you have your things that like aren't as optimally nutritious. Because really, when we're talking about nutrition, like everything is nutrition that you eat. Like that, it all has like different macronutrients. It's either carb, protein, or fat. And then you have like your micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. Those are the distinguishing factors. Like, are these foods rich in these micronutrients? What are the ratio of macronutrients? Like, what type of macronutrients? So is it simple carbs, which is like going to be sugar and things like that? Or does it have more complex carbs, which would be fiber and complex starches? So that's the way in which I like to categorize versus using the terms like good or bad, because I try to, really a lot of the work that I do is like steering people away from the idea that they are like doing something horrible if they eat a slice of pizza, or that you have to go vegan to be healthy.
Can we talk about something related to that? How do you feel about the concept of cheat days? I know we hear about that a lot. Oh, my weekends are my cheat days, where I can eat what I want, or I can do this or do that. So how do you feel about that whole concept of having cheat days when it comes to eating?
I understand it conceptually if you have nutrition goals that are related to weight loss, because a lot of people do. I don't like the term because it just creates like this moral hierarchy when it comes to food. What I really liked for people to do if they have weight loss goals, such as just be more realistic. Typically when people talk about cheat days, it's because they're being overly restrictive with whatever diet they have set themselves up for to lose weight. So there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do when it comes to like sustainable weight loss and just weight loss in general, how long it actually takes to lose weight and how like it is actually a longer process than people think it is. So with the idea of cheat days, I'm just kind of like, creating balance, like a good, healthy balance, like throughout your week and planning ahead of time is going to be a more sustainable approach than like doing cheat days, for instance.
That's actually a really great point, because I do feel that a lot of times, like you said, we put so much emphasis on restriction when it comes to weight loss. And then we wonder, well, why am I not able to keep this weight off? Because I'm putting myself on these very restrictive diets that's not sustainable on a long-term scale. And then I can't sustain it because either I'm burnt out by restricting myself, I'm not enjoying what I eat anymore. And then we get to the point where we're overindulging. Then when you do have, what's called a cheat day, now you're overindulging and kind of backtracking versus giving yourself the enjoyment that you need instead of restricting yourself completely, just having things that you enjoy in modification, So I feel like we as a society kind of really get caught up in that whole, like, I need to be restrictive. Even just, I remember Lori Harvey sharing some of her tips for weight loss. Like, she was thicker, like previously and years ago, and she's lost a lot of weight and she looks great. So this is no shade to her, but I just remember her. Yeah, no shade. But she's sharing that she was only consuming like 1,200 calories a day. And it's just like, these people are in the comments like taking notes. When we look at celebrities, they are influencers by default. We have influencers and then we have celebrities, and celebrities are influencers by default. So then when you're hearing them out, like, speak about these things, I know like she was just sharing what worked for her, but we have to be realistic. 1,200 calories is not sustainable on a long-term scale by any means.
And she has help that people don't have. She has trainers. She has all these other people coaching her on what to do. Imagine trying to do that by yourself and say, I'm going to only eat 1,200 calories today and starve myself, and then tomorrow I might overdo it. Like, it's not the right strategy. Maybe it
Yeah.
worked for her, but it does not always mean it's going to work for the everyday person.
Right. That was actually, it is my most popular TikTok to date, me doing commentary on that 1200 calorie diet that she was talking about. And I still get a lot of comments from people on that, folks arguing in the comments like, why do 1200 calories, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I mean, sure, like if you are an adult that's like very short and perhaps small framed and like that is your calorie deficit for weight loss, then that works for you. But it's truly not sustainable for most people, like we said. And yeah, just trying to really combat a lot of the ideas like that influencers put out there, because they're influencers for a reason. They really reach the people, but they're not always rooted in fact. A lot of times they're not rooted in research. They're not rooted in science. They're just rooted in, oh, this is what worked for me. And then a lot of times it really don't even work for them. So
Exactly, or work for them for a short amount of time, but they don't
exactly.
tell people the full story. Like, oh yeah, I lost all this weight and then I gained it right back.
Right, exactly.
But what would you say are some of the most common myths regarding nutrition, maybe from what you've experienced with your clients or your patients, or just maybe things that you've seen on social media? For example, drinking alcohol won't make me gain weight, or bad nutrition only comes from sugary foods like candy and juices and things like that. So if I stay away from that, I'll be fine. So if you could share, a little bit of some of those myths and debunk some of those myths with us.
Yeah, so nutrition, just like any other science, is very nuanced science, right? So we start to get into like these absolutes, all or nothings, and that's where things get pretty scary. The idea that carbs are bad for you is like probably the biggest one that I can think of. And just, with the popularization of like the keto diet as of recently, and like even still like low carb diets that have been out for a while, like your South Beach diet and the Atkins and all these things, there really has been like a strong demonization of carbs throughout the years, and fats as well. Protein has always been pretty safe, but carbs and fats have, and I'm like, you have to think about what is our food made of. And like we talked about before, it's only made of things. So you mean to tell me that an apple is bad for you because it has carbs, because it has sugar? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? When we think about all of the actual benefits that fruits and vegetables have, it's just that when people start to get into these restrictive diets, now it's like they're telling folks, okay, on keto diet, I can only have berries. But you have to think about like a whole nutrition profile that you're missing by not eating these other things that contain sugars and carbs you're just trying to get rid of. So definitely the biggest one for me, and one that I really work hard to push back against, is that carbs are bad for you. Carbs are not bad for you. The type and the amounts of anything that you're eating is truly what makes the difference. If you eat carbs in the form of sugars all day, and that's like the majority of the time in which you consume your carbs, you will definitely see the negative effect of that. If you eat sugars in moderation and you get the majority of your carbs from like complex starches, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, which are high in fiber, that balance out the sugars there, then you're going to be much better off. And you don't have to stop eating carbs to lose weight or to manage your diabetes. It's just not the truth. It's just not the science. So that's one of the biggest ones.
Sarah, are there any resources out there that the audience can go to understand a little bit more about carbs and how to balance that out a little bit better?
Yeah, so choosemyplate.gov is the government website for nutrition that folks can go to for accessible resources. They're all free. There's different resources that are set out for different chronic illnesses, and then just general nutrition. You can also go to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is our governing body as dietitians, and they also have handouts for like the lay population. That's digestible information. It's not as like wordy and sciencey, but for like the average everyday person to really understand. And they have infographics and those sort of things as well. Those are like the two trusted resources that I always recommend.
Thanks for sharing that, because I know it can get very overwhelming for the average person, hearing words that they never really heard before, and just trying to kind of have an understanding. And then another thing is I think that can be very challenging for those that are trying to get better with their nutrition, is just trying to get out of those old habits of even, something simple as the habit of thinking, oh, carbs are bad. Or, I mean, we hear all the time, back to what you said about the keto diet, that whole diet is based on the thought process of carbs being bad or carbs being the enemy, so we want to limit them. I remember I had a friend that was on the diet, and when she told me how many grams of carbs that she was on per day on this diet, I was just floored, because I'm just like, how is this sustainable on a long-term scale? So yes, you're seeing this weight drop and all of that. So I think it's very important, for individuals to have those resources that they something that's tangible, something that they can access very quickly, but also things that are going to be easy for them to understand, that's going to have pictures or infographics, so that we can really kind of get out of that mindset and really honestly reprogram ourselves, because so much of what we've been taught is from when we were kids, and a lot of things, or when you were kids, like, you might have gotten rewarded with candy or sugar or things like that, so you program your mind to think certain ways about certain food groups. So
yes,
that's definitely very important for sure.
I agree. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. So I'm going into primary care. So this next question is very, very important to me, and will be important to my future patients, because I plan to work in underserved communities. So can you please define what a food desert is and how they impact?
Yeah, so I love this question. When I saw it on the brief, I was so excited, because when I was doing my internship at Mississippi State, one of the topics that I took on for a project was about food deserts, because Mississippi has a huge food desert issue. So just so that we're clear, like, a lot of southern states rank very high as far as like education, income, like mortality rate, all of those things, because they have, huge lack of resources, income, all of those things. As we can see right now, what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi, which is absolutely horrible with the water crisis. I mean, Flint all over again. I just don't understand why this is happening. But thinking about like food deserts, so the area that I was in, Mississippi State, is in Starkville, which is like kind of northeast Mississippi. And so I did kind of like survey the area to see what would be considered a food desert. And there's really no like geographically defining term as far as like, by miles or anything, but it's pretty much any area where you don't have like access to healthy or affordable groceries, meaning like access to fresh fruits and vegetables, or, really many fruits and vegetables in general, fresh meats, grains, things that are like within a reasonable distance for somebody to be able to like walk to or take the bus to. That would be considered like more of a food desert, which we see, like I said, a lot in places in the South and southern states.
That's actually really scary to think about it. My little brother actually is in Jackson right now, going to college in Mississippi, and he has firsthand experience with the water issues. So to think about that compounded on top of a potential food desert for a location like that, it's just crazy. And I just really hope that we continue to push the needle to solve some of the issues that largely impact our community.
Yeah, it's truly terrifying. Being growing up in Chicago and just being surrounded by, a lot of resources, because we are a big city, it really just like reminds you even the amount of privilege that you have, like living in certain areas within the country. Even in regards to like natural disasters, which I think about a lot. In the Midwest, we don't experience like too many, especially like water related things. So it just really puts into perspective like what different people are going through in different parts of this country, where we already have like so many infrastructure issues.
Oh goodness, yeah, definitely. Especially like moving from the Midwest to Florida, well, South Florida now, where it's like, I mean, the biggest thing for us was tornadoes every now and then. Now it's hurricane season every single year. You're preparing for that, and I've seen firsthand some of the aftermath. Thankfully, I haven't been significantly impacted But I've definitely, had friends that have been, and even, some of my professors that were truly that were significantly impacted by that. So when you think about those type of issues already on top of food, you're already in food deserts, or you're already in areas where, it's difficult to have access. And then now you have a natural disaster that's impacted that. So it's just problems on top of problems, and it really just poses significant issues for members of those type of communities.
Absolutely.
And I agree, Sarah, and I challenge even some of our audience to think about where you live or where you grew up, and try and think about dang, did I live in a food desert? Because that's something that happened to me when I did my public health program. I had to really look back on my childhood experience, and was like, I'm from Detroit, and we do have resources, but I realized I was privileged because although I lived in the inner city, we had a car, so we didn't. We could just get up and go to Meijer. We can just get up and go to Walmart, to a grocery store. But when I think about how many people didn't have transportation, I'm like, wow. For them, we did live in a food desert because we didn't have quality grocery stores in our neighborhood. You had to go at least 20 minutes to get to one. I think we had a Farmer Jack when I was really, really little, but once that closed, there was no grocery stores, not quality grocery stores at least, within a 5-10 minute or even 20-minute walk. So I'm like, wow, that's just definitely something to think about. And I think we're very blessed now that they're trying very hard to get resources to people. But with that being said, Sarah, do you know of any potential nutritional solutions for people who may live in food deserts, some alternative options if they're experiencing that?
Yeah, so also looking to see if you have local farmers markets can be helpful, or if there's farmers markets in your area, different food banks. So I know here in Chicago, we have the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which we have a lot of different food banks located throughout the city. And I used to work at my first job. I used to work for a food pantry program through the agency that I worked at. So we had 3 different locations in the city for people to be able to access. And then again, just understanding what you have available to you and being able to get the most out of that. So if you don't have a great selection of fresh fruits and vegetables where you're at, how do you have canned vegetables or frozen options? The problem with a lot of canned is that it's not that you can't have them, it's just that perhaps they're higher in sodium usually if you can't find a low or no sodium version. I buy certain canned vegetables, but I make sure I can get the low or no sodium version of it just for convenience sake, but I also keep fresh and frozen, so I have all 3 on rotation. Just really being able to see what they have available and what's going to be the best for you to be able to plan out your meals. I've seen a lot of these hauls on YouTube, these Dollar Tree hauls and stuff where people are getting full grocery shopping trips from the Dollar Tree. And the stuff really wasn't bad. I didn't really have too many complaints with some of the stuff. And even, it reminded me of Trader Joe with some of the novelty items that they may carry that you just kind of didn't expect them to have. So just looking and seeing what the stores have, and then looking into resources outside of just regular grocery retailers.
Oh, love that.
Yeah,
I'm just going to make a challenge too. I'm sorry, this has been one of my lifelong challenges. Our billionaires, Jay-Z, Diddy, Kanye, Rihanna, I just want them to build a grocery store. Just put that in our communities. Can we get healthy food options in our communities? Put your money there. Sorry, I got to make that challenge because I've been one time.
That would be great. That would be great.
That would be amazing.
It's truly foundational. What we eat determines, or what we eat or what we don't eat really determines our capacity to function on a daily basis. So if you're not getting good regular nutrition, just think about all the potential that's being missed out on, especially from our community being undernourished or malnourished in a lot of cases. So I agree with you, India. That would be great.
Yes,
Wishful
I
thinking.
agree with all of
Right.
y'all. I definitely agree. And so just to wrap this episode up, if you are food insecure, meaning you know can't afford groceries or may not have access to like fresh produce on a weekly basis, some of the resources that you can use are farmers markets, food banks. And if you really don't know where to start, something that I learned in my first year of med school being in clinic is talk to your doctor about it. We actually do screen for food insecurity at my clinic, and we kind of like source them out to local food banks, and we even have a food pantry at our clinic. So if you don't know where to start, definitely start by talking to your doctor. Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to have Sarah on another episode, so stay tuned for part 2.
Yeah.
And remember to always keep it pretty.
Thank you, ladies, so much.
As always, thank you for joining us for the ride. Be sure to keep in touch by following us on Instagram and subscribing to our YouTube channel at Pretty in Practice. Feel free to send us a DM of any topics you want us to discuss, and you might hear them on a future Pretty in Practice episode. Keep it pretty.